Hey everybody, Rich from Sticky's RC, and today I'm going to talk to you about shocks and tuning your shocks. So this video really is geared towards the beginner. Somebody who's new, maybe has a crawler, maybe has a trail truck, maybe a couple. They've been out, they've been having fun with it, and now they want to take the performance up a notch, or they just want their rig to work better. So the main idea with the oil in the shocks is how quickly the shock can move. The main idea behind the spring is how much weight or how much pressure that shock can handle. Now if you have too light of a spring on your rig, you're going to notice that it's going to ride around pretty much with no upward travel, and it's probably going to be bouncing around quite a bit. If you have too heavy of a spring on your rig, you're going to notice that it's at the top of its upward travel, and it's also going to be bouncing around quite a bit. So tuning your springs is very, very important. And this is also something that requires a little bit of trial and error. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is oil. Now, basic fundamentals about oil is the lower number of the oil, the lighter weight oil it is. The higher the number, the heavier weight. A heavier weight oil is going to react much slower. A lower weight oil is going to allow the spring and the shock to move much more freely. Now, if you're in a situation where you have a lot of jagged rocks and you're moving over very quickly, you may need the suspension to react very, very quickly. So you may be running a medium spring with a lightweight oil and allowing that suspension to eat up those bumps. That would be more of something in a racing or a bouncing scenario rather than a rock crawling or a trailing scenario. So most of the time when you get an RTR or a kit, it's going to come with 30 weight oil in it. And 30 weight is a pretty good starting point. Generally, when I'm tuning my suspension, I start out with 40 weight oil. The reason why I like 40 weight is because it's basically kind of in the middle of the oil weight spectrum. The next thing I'm going to talk about are the springs. Springs are what make the suspension work. Now, to a certain degree, gravity is helping you out. The springs are there to also hold the rig and hold the suspension and create some consistency in how your suspension is responding to the terrain. Generally, if you're going to change springs, the easiest way to change springs is you have an idea of whether or not you want a heavier spring or a lighter spring on your rig. So you go to whatever manufacturer that you bought your rig from. An RTR generally comes with a medium spring from that company, and almost every company has different springs for their shocks. When you're buying springs, buy the next up stiffer spring and the next lower softer spring than what's already in your rig. Because if you buy the heavier spring, take it out and run it, and it doesn't work, you're going to want to put a softer spring in, and it's also subjective because of the terrain. Never ever think that when you buy something for an RC that you're never ever going to use it if it doesn't work for one rig. Different springs will work for different setups. You may even end up changing the springs out on your rig to a spring that you didn't like at one point, changing it to that spring because of the terrain that you're on. That spring works better. The other part about your suspension setup that is really, really important, and that is making sure that nothing is binding. And that is just something that's very easy to check, and that is by simply going through and checking to make sure that those shocks are moving freely, that your links are able to move freely. That ensures that your suspension is working the way it's intended to work. Hopefully, some of the things I talked about today were helpful and will help you learn and dive a little bit more into your RC trailing or rock crawling rig. And it helps you to know a little bit more about how to start the approach of tuning your suspension. As I said in the beginning, suspension tuning is very subjective. So everybody that you talk to is probably going to tell you some of the basic things that are the same, but beyond that, everybody's going to have a different idea of how to tune suspension. In essence, the art of tuning suspension really boils down to trial and error. And that is what you will hear a lot of people say, is that you really have to try it for yourself to find out whether or not you like it or not. So, again, I hope this video helps, and I hope that I taught you something, or at least put you in the right direction of how to tune your suspension and what you can do to tune your suspension, so that as you move forward in this hobby, you have a better idea of how to make your rig work better for you. Thank you so much for watching. Truly, truly appreciate the support for the channel. Also want to remind everybody that every Monday night, the Operation 11 Charlie team has a live show over on the Operation 11 Charlie YouTube channel. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday nights. We always have special guests on the show. We always have a lot of fun. So please come help support this wonderful organization. Join myself and the rest of the team. We'll see you there.